When 50 Cent dropped his Netflix documentary on Diddy in early December, millions of people clicked play expecting answers. What they got instead was a 4-episode surface-level recap that left out some of the darkest parts of the story. And the more people started digging into what actually got cut, the more one person kept coming up, over and over again. Janice Combs, Diddy's mother. The documentary barely gave her 5 minutes of screen time. 5 minutes. For a woman who raised him alone, worked multiple jobs to support him, and according to people close to the family, shaped everything he became. So here's the question nobody's asking out loud. What was so important about Janice's role in this story that it needed to be buried on the cutting room floor? Because when you start looking at the deleted scenes, the resurfaced clips, and what people who actually knew the family are saying, the picture changes completely. And honestly, it makes you wonder if the Netflix version was protecting someone besides just Diddy. Stick around because we're going to break down what the documentary showed, what it didn't show, and why Janice Combs became the most interesting question nobody wants to answer. So let's start with what actually made it into the Netflix doc. When Diddy got arrested and all the federal allegations started coming out, Janice released a statement. On the surface, it sounded like a mother defending her son, but if you read it carefully, it's actually way more about protecting herself. The focus isn't on whether Diddy did what he's accused of. It's about making sure nobody looks at her and thinks she was a bad parent or that she knew what was happening behind closed doors. And that's already telling you something. But here's where things get interesting. Back in 1991, there was a stampede at City College in New York. It happened at an event Diddy was promoting. 9 people died. It was tragic and massive. After that incident, Kurt Burrows, one of the co-founders of Bad Boy Records, came forward with a claim. He said he saw Diddy slap his own mother because she questioned him about what happened. It's a serious allegation, and Janice completely shut it down in the documentary, denied it ever happened. But, and this is important, multiple people who knew the family back then have told very different stories. People who were actually there have said something like, that did occur. So you've got the official deny on camera. And then you've got unnamed sources and former associates saying something else went down. The timeline doesn't add up, and that's always the thing that makes people start asking harder questions. Now, to understand Janice's story, you need the context first. Diddy's father, Melvin Combs, was killed when Diddy was just 2 years old, so Janice raised him alone. She always told the story that she worked 3 jobs to support them. One as a teacher's assistant, that was the legitimate one. Then she said she did modeling, though there's honestly not much proof of that anywhere. And then there's this third job she never really specified. And people who knew the family hint that this third thing gets a lot darker than she's ever publicly said. When you put all that together, you're getting a picture of the environment Diddy grew up in. And this is what multiple people close to the family have been saying consistently. The home life, whatever it actually was, shaped everything he became. That's not controversial. That's just how people work. But here's the problem. The documentary doesn't go anywhere near this. It shows Janice making a statement, and that's basically it. It doesn't dig into her history, doesn't question the timeline, doesn't ask what she means when she's being vague about her third job. It just moves on. And there's a reason people are now saying, that's not a mistake. That's a choice. One of the loudest voices pushing back on Janice's defense statement was Freddy P. You might know him as a rapper, but more importantly for this, he was actually signed to Diddy's label. So he was close to the operation. He knew people involved. He wasn't just some random commentator. When Janice released her statement defending Diddy, Freddie didn't stay quiet. He went online and basically said her defense means nothing. And he went hard. He said, Janice Combs is that everybody I don't give a talk about. You go out seeing her defend Diddy, like sit your ass down. You the worst person. You're the wrong one. You got somebody like R. Kelly coming to talk it up for you. Like, nah, shut up. We don't need you. And then he went deeper. He said, you're the reason a man like he is. Let's sit with that for a second. Freddie's saying that Janice wasn't just protecting Diddy in her statement. She was actually part of the reason he turned out the way he did. He's claiming she was present during what allegedly went down. She saw what was happening, and she chose not to intervene. That's not him saying she did something to Diddy. That's him saying she enabled something. And because Freddie actually worked closely with Diddy for years, people listened to what he was saying. It had weight. But the documentary never addresses this. It doesn't bring Freddy P on camera. It doesn't ask Janice about these accusations. It just leaves that whole conversation out of the official record. Now, here's something that really started making people suspicious. There's this whole moment from the beginning of the documentary that became a topic online, and it's about what Janice looked like on different days. On the first day of Diddy's trial, she showed up and she looked completely different than how she normally appears. Her foot was wrapped up like a mummy. She was hobbling around on a bulky walker, looking frail and distressed. It was hard to watch. But then just 2 days later, she showed up looking like a completely different person. The heavy foot wrapping was gone. The walker was gone. People online started asking if maybe she had played it up for the cameras on day one. Now, look, people do have real health issues. Bad days and good days are real. But the timing of it, the dramatic shift, and then how she appeared again later in the trial started making people wonder if the image was being managed, if there was a strategy to looking vulnerable when cameras were rolling. The documentary doesn't address any of this. It doesn't show those clips side by side. It doesn't let viewers make their own observations. That stuff gets left out too. But the biggest thing that got people talking is this. According to Rolling Stone, which broke down what was supposed to be in the documentary, there were interviews with people who actually knew Diddy growing up. One of them is Tim Dog Patterson, described as an alleged childhood friend and hip-hop producer who knew Puff. And here's what Patterson allegedly said. He said that Janice Combs would often throw wild parties at her place when Diddy was young, not like family gatherings. Wild parties. Now, if you know anything about Diddy's whole reputation, if you've seen any of the allegations coming out about what went down at his houses, about the parties he threw as an adult, you can see why people are now asking, where did he learn that? Did he just come up with it on his own? Or did he grow up watching his mother do something similar? Because if you look at Diddy's public history, the whole idea of lavish, exclusive parties where anything goes, that's become synonymous with his name. And one theory people are now exploring is that maybe he didn't invent that whole thing himself. Maybe he learned it from watching his own mom. As gross as that sounds, as uncomfortable as it is to even say out loud, that's what people who knew the family are now claiming. And the documentary leaves it out completely. You don't hear Tim Dog Patterson's interview. You don't hear what he actually said about Janice and these parties. That whole angle just disappears. And when you start looking at what 50 Cent said about why material got cut, it gets interesting. In an interview that's been circulating, he was asked directly about all the footage he had that didn't make it into the final 4 episodes. And he basically said everything couldn't make it because time didn't allow. He said there was so much material he had to pick and choose. He mentioned some things that got cut, like details about Diddy dating women who had previously dated Tupac, which is another rabbit hole entirely. But he didn't specifically address why Janice's material got so drastically reduced. And that's the thing. We don't actually know if 50 made the call to cut Janice's story, or if Netflix made the call, or if there were other pressures. What we do know is that it happened. What we do know is that people close to Diddy told stories about his mother that don't appear in the final product. What we know is that at least one person who worked with Diddy for years, Freddy P, came out and said Janice was part of the problem, and that didn't make the cut either. Here's another detail that people latched onto. Janice and Diddy's relationship, from everything that's publicly available, has always been complicated. There's footage of them together where it seems warm, where you see them joking around, where she's calling him baby and telling him she loves him. But there's also this undercurrent of something else. When Diddy was at the peak of his power, when he was running Bad Boy Records and throwing these legendary parties, where was Janice? Was she involved? Did she know? Did she participate? The documentary shows her in some archival footage, but it never really explores the depth of her involvement in his world. And that's a choice. That's an editorial decision. And it's one that a lot of people think was made to protect her. Because here's what people are saying now. And this is the conversation happening in forums and comment sections and Twitter. Janice Combs might be the most important figure in understanding how Diddy became who he became. And the official story we're being told is deliberately keeping her out of the narrative. She's either complicit, which is the worst case scenario, or she knew something and didn't act, which is still pretty bad. Or she's innocent and just got caught in her son's mess. But the documentary isn't giving us the tools to figure out which one it is. It's actively preventing that conversation. And honestly, that's wild. Think about all the other people who've gotten brought into these kinds of documentaries. Think about how much detail gets examined and re-examined, but Janice gets 5 minutes. 5 minutes for someone who's been part of Diddy's story since before he was even Diddy. So what about the stuff that's actually being dug up now that people know to look for it? There are resurfaced clips circulating online, interviews, old videos, and they're starting to show a different picture of Janice than the one the documentary presents. She's not just a background figure. She's not just a concerned mother. In some of these clips, she's at the parties. She's involved. She's part of the scene. And when you combine that with what people like Tim Dog Patterson have said about her throwing her own wild parties, you start getting a very different narrative about Diddy's upbringing. Not just about what his father's absence meant for him, but about what his mother's presence meant, about what he learned from her, about what was normalized in his home. The deleted scenes are important here because deletion is an action. It means someone made a decision to keep something out. You don't delete something by accident. You don't accidentally leave out hours of footage about someone's mother, especially not when that mother is tied to the central question of how this person became who they are. And here's the part that really gets people frustrated. 50 Cent has been very public about wanting to tell the truth, about being the one who's not scared to say what others won't say. But if the most relevant material about Diddy's origins and influences got cut from his documentary, then what exactly are we calling the truth here? Is it the whole truth, or is it the truth with the most difficult parts removed? Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about Diddy anymore. It's about accountability, and it's about whether we're actually getting the full story or a carefully curated version of it. And based on what we're seeing, it really does seem like Janice Combs is the person whose story is being protected the most. And that's interesting. That's the thing that makes people ask questions. Multiple people are now saying publicly or anonymously that Janice knew more than she said, that she was around for more than the documentary shows, that her role in shaping Diddy's behavior in his world is way bigger than 5 minutes of screen time would suggest. Are they right? We don't have definitive proof either way. But we do have deleted scenes that somebody didn't want you to see. We have resurfaced clips that show something different than the official narrative, and we have voices like Freddy P's saying out loud that this woman played a role in who Diddy became. So the real question for you watching this is, do you think Janice Combs knows more than she said? Do you think her involvement was bigger than what we're being told? And do you think it's fair that the documentary left her story on the cutting room floor? Because honestly, I want to know. The comment section is yours. Let me know what you think about what got left out and why. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time, because we're going to keep digging into the parts of these stories that the official versions don't want you to see. And there's a lot more coming about what actually happened behind the scenes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.